Hello, welcome to your favorite bookish podcast, Fully Booked and Caffeinated. I'm Kelsey,
And I'm Heather.
and today we will be discussing and reviewing the witchy paranormal fiction book Cackle by Rachel Harrison. As usual, let's talk about our fuel for this discussion. What are you drinking, Heather?
I am currently hydrating with water, but this morning I, of course, got my iced caramel coffee from Dunkin' because it's my typical thing that I do every day. But I have to say, I'm looking forward to the fall drinks. I told you about Starbucks. They have a pecan latte, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm a little annoyed that you sent it to me and it said coming in October. I was
know.
like, what? What?
And I'm
It's like
also
you can release them in August the same way that TJ Maxx
I
puts out their
know.
Halloween stuff.
Which I'm just ready, full blown ready for fall now. I could care less about summer. I'm over it.
I'm pissed because the weather is finally nice enough to spend time outside. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not oppressively hot, but I tried reading outside a couple times and I got devoured by mosquitoes and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah, they're not
okay. So it's
fun.
either
Mm-hmm.
stifling humidity or bugs."
Yes. Can't win.
So I did get a couple beach days in, so I guess I'm ready for fall. I love fall, but it leads to winter, and you know how sad that
Yes.
is.
Unfortunately. Womp womp.
Yes, but this is a nice, cozy, getting ready for fall mystery.
It was, and in reading this, it made me want fall that much more because now I'm just
Yeah.
so ready for witchy time.
Oh my gosh, I know. So for my coffee, well, right now I'm hydrating also, but I got a delicious iced cinnamon dolce latte,
Mm.
and I added toffee nut syrup to it, obviously, because
I
I'm
still have to try
a
that.
slut
That
for
sounds
toffee
really
nut.
good. I think I'm gonna have to do that.
Oh, but I forgot to tell them no whipped cream, and I don't love the
Mm.
whipped cream on it. It
Me
just
either.
like changes the whole flavor.
Mm-hmm. It really does.
So that was my fault, but my drink was still delicious.
Sounds good.
All right. Cheers with our water.
Cheers. Staying hydrated. Woohoo.
We're in our 30s. Okay, give us a break. We need to hydrate.
If I don't stay hydrated, bad things happen.
I will shrivel up like a raisin. Okay, so Rachel Harrison has several published novels, and there's really not much about her online. Everything is pretty much career-based info, besides that she lives in New York with her husband and cat. But I was stalking her Instagram because I was like, I gotta see what this girl's all about. I want to be best friends with Rachel Harrison. Like, she looks so fun. She dresses cute. She was in Asbury recently and posted a bunch
Oh,
of like artsy, fun pictures. And I was like, wow, I want to be friends with her. Her cat is
that's
very cute too. It
fun.
didn't have the cat's name. It might have. I could have stalked harder. But anyway, so I don't know that much about her besides she looks like I would want to be friends with her.
That tracks.
So let's talk about this book. It is categorized as horror, which I don't necessarily agree with, but we will get to it. It was published in October 2021, nominated for Best Horror with Goodreads in 2021, and it won the Ladies of Horror Fiction Award for Best Novel of 2021, which the Ladies of Horror, I need to look more into that.
You do.
I mean, are you guys looking for new members? Can I be a part of this voting board? Because I would love it. All right, so let's just get right into it. Here is our book summary from none other than Goodreads. All her life, Annie has played it nice and safe. After being unceremoniously dumped by her longtime boyfriend, Annie seeks a fresh start. She accepts a teaching position that moves her from Manhattan to a small village upstate. She's stunned by how perfect and picturesque the town is. The people are all friendly and warm. Her new apartment is dreamy too, minus the oddly persistent spider infestation. Then Annie meets Sophie. Beautiful, charming, magnetic Sophie, who takes a special interest in Annie, who wants to be her friend. More importantly, she wants Annie to stop apologizing and start living for herself. That's how Sophie lives. Annie can't help but gravitate toward the self-possessed Sophie, wanting to spend more and more time with her, despite the fact that the rest of the townsfolk seem a little afraid of her. And like, okay, there are some things. Sophie's appearance is uncanny and ageless. Her mansion in the middle of the woods feels a little unearthly, and she does seem to wield a certain power. but she couldn't be. Could she? I love this summary
I
so
know this
much
this is a good summary.
because it gives you such a feel for the tone of the book because it just has that kind of conversational, familiar, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And how it sets up that question, you already know what's going on.
Oh
You
yeah.
you already know what you're in for, but you go in waiting to see how it will unfold. All right, so we start out with Annie on her 30th birthday, and she's really acting like this is the start to the end of her life, which I was offended
Truly.
by, but okay.
hmm
And she's getting ready to leave the city after 11 years. Her coworker, who she kind of hates on, but actually sounds like a really fun and caring person, forces her to go out for drinks for her birthday, even though she'd rather wallow at home or awkwardly try to make the quote unquote friendship with her ex happen. So they get drunk and they end up going to a psychic who gets real weird with Annie and says that she has dark energy surrounding her. Immediately, I was like, yes, set me up for this horror novel.
hmm
Let's do it. Where this is ominous, we're painting a picture. And Annie doesn't believe in psychics. So she's like, okay, that was super weird. I am unclear on what Annie believes in and doesn't believe in.
I agree with this wholeheartedly.
She just,
Because it was, I don't know.
she couldn't be convinced. But oh, I think it was because the psychic had IKEA furniture, which like really offended Annie for
It
some
did.
reason. I mean, as someone who furnished half of their home with IKEA furniture, I think she should lighten up a little bit. But anyway, so Annie moves to a new town in upstate New York, which is small and cozy and totally gives Gilmore Girls vibes.
I want to live in this town.
I thought that so vividly. Remember when we had that question on Bookish Banter, like,
hmm
where would you want to live? And I was like, this is the type of town that Heather is talking
It
about. And
literally is.
it's upstate, so they have a bunch of apple farms or
hmm
apple orchards and pumpkin farms
Farmers
and
market every Saturday. That just sounds
yes.
delightful. The coffee shop sounds amazing. I was literally, this is my dream. This is my dream
Yes.
town that I would like to reside in. Please and thank
hmm
you.
Everyone is super nice, super friendly. And pretty quickly, Annie meets Sophie, who is apparently the most gorgeous and captivating woman to ever exist. The way she described her, she did sound very ethereal and magical.
hmm
So when Annie and Sophie go out in public together for the first time, it's weird. Everyone knows Sophie, which is the side effect of a small town, but also the way they all interact with her
hmm
is the weird part. So some are very nervous. Some are desperate to please her. Some are polite, but try to get away as soon as they can. And she also doesn't pay for anything.
She doesn't. She dips out
She
on
takes what she
everything.
wants.
Uh huh.
And Annie's like, do we have to, should we, no? Okay. And when Annie questions her, Sophie says it's because she owns most of the town's land. So she's basically everyone's landlord. And
hmm
that's why they all know her and they don't make her pay. And Annie is super excited that this beautiful woman wants to befriend her so quickly. So obviously that answer's enough. She's like, okay, great. You own a lot of land. So they start spending a lot of time together. And Sophie really wants to spoil Annie and cook for her and bake for her and spend all of her time with her. But Annie has some reservations about sleepovers because Sophie lives in a huge, spooky mansion
hmm
castle.
I there were so many rooms. I was trying to envision what this place might look like, and I couldn't because it was
I could not picture it
extreme,
all.
extreme.
Yeah. And every time that they were together, they were in a new room
They were. And there's an indoor swimming pool.
that she said was like a cave. It was like in the
It
basement.
was yeah, that was a lot.
I'm not sure. But Annie thinks this huge spooky mansion castle is haunted, which even if I hadn't had any specific incidents, I would also think that this place is haunted.
hmm
But more on that later. So as Annie is adjusting, we get a lot of interactions with Sam, her shitty ex-boyfriend. I will say I liked their joking, dry banter
Mm-hmm.
and the way that they would bounce off of each other, and you could tell it was well represented that they had a long relationship.
I agree. But the
But
desperation that Annie has, and this is one of the things I liked about Sophie, was that she was very much trying to teach her that you don't need to be in a relationship. You don't need a man to just be happy. But Annie was so obsessed with this idea of Sam, which he seems
yeah,
kind of like a dick. So
she was
why?
so obsessed with this idea of I'm supposed to fall in love and settle down.
Mm-hmm. And
And
she was like
Sophie is
willing
like,
to change herself to like get Sam back, and
yes,
it's like that's the sign of a red flag right there.
hmm,
You need to
that's
change yourself
codependency.
to be what you think your partner needs instead of just being you. Then you instantly have a problem.
Hmm. And Sophie's like, I would never be with another person, especially not a man. And I'm like, I get you, Sophie. Also, you don't need to be friends with your ex. No one can convince me otherwise, especially when Annie is so clearly still in love with him.
Oh, I
It's
know
it's heartbreaking
it
and
is.
uncomfortable. And every
Mm-hmm.
time that she called him, I was like, no, no, I don't want to hear this. So then Annie has her new job. She's a teacher and she's getting picked on pretty relentlessly.
Yeah.
When she confides in Sophie about this, Sophie makes some joke about, oh, should I curse the kids that are bothering you? And Annie's like, you're so funny. No, he's an annoying child. I can handle it. So the next time that Annie is in class and the kids are making fun of her, she decides that she needs to set the main perpetrator straight so this doesn't continue. She needs to establish her dominance because they keep making bird sounds.
Because her last name is Crane, and apparently she looks like a bird.
I was, after she said that she looks like a bird, I was just picturing her not very, like very exaggerated bird
Mm-hmm.
features. You know what I mean?
Yes, like maybe a big pointy nose,
Yeah,
long,
like small beady
elongated
eyes.
neck.
Yeah, especially next to Sophie. Not great.
No,
But anyway, so before she can set him straight, he has an episode where he's kind of choking to death and like turning colors and holding his throat, and no one does anything.
no one
Not a
helps him
single thing.
whatsoever.
She's just staring. All the other kids are staring. And Annie thinks that it's a joke, even though he's turning colors. I'm not sure. And then he coughs up a giant spider, which is still alive. It scurries away
No, thank
after he
you.
throws it up. I was getting like my best friend's exorcism
Yeah.
flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't love it. And once again, it's all very weird. And people at school start to treat her differently. And she's trying to figure out how the heck that happened because it all just seems so unlikely and perfectly timed. So Annie puts her thinking cap on and the wheels are turning. And she's like, this couldn't be on purpose, could it? Also, what is with this town and spiders? Because Annie's seeing spiders everywhere.
Everywhere.
And she's very nice. She doesn't hurt the spiders. She traps them and sets them free. Better
Better than
woman than me.
me.
Couldn't be me.
Could not be me. There was too many spiders in this for my personal taste. But
And they
it's
kept
fine.
getting bigger. They kept getting bigger. We'll get to it.
We will.
We'll get to it. Okay. So the next time she sees Sophie, Sophie hints at it pretty hard that she is responsible for cursing the young boy. And also she's a witch. But she doesn't use the word.
No. Dances around it.
And Annie pretty quickly accepts that Sophie is a witch.
No reservations whatsoever. No second thoughts. No, maybe I shouldn't hang out with you because I don't want to be cursed. Just full blown accepts it. No questions asked. I get
Fully.
it. It's fine. And this was my first problem with this character
Mm-hmm.
of many.
I believe in this type of stuff, and I
Mhm.
still would have needed more convincing.
I know. There
And
was
she's
just
like,
not enough.
I don't believe in psychics. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in this, that, and the third. And I was like,
But a lich? Sign me up.
just because some kid coughed up a spider? I don't know. She she goes pretty hard for this. So, okay, whatever. Who am I to judge? I would probably accept anything that Sophie said also.
Mm-hmm.
So, after the cat's out of the bag, or the spider's out of the bag,
That's more on par.
it's fitting for this book. So, anyway, Sophie starts telling Annie the craziest shit. Like how she's hundreds of years old, she's been drowned
Mm-hmm.
numerous times by the townspeople. And the reason these current townspeople actually fear her is because of legend passed down from their ancestors who knew Sophie was a witch and that she was obviously more powerful than them and impervious to their murder attempts. Like, this poor woman, stop trying to kill her. She
I know.
already decided that you will not.
She seems nice.
For the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see her do anything to the townspeople specifically except never pay for her pancakes or her coffee,
Exactly.
but that's
Mm-hmm.
that's that's a barter business. That's not my business. So next, we have to discuss my absolute favorite character, which is probably your absolute favorite character, Ralph.
I fucking love Ralph.
Ralph the spider.
Listen, this made me. I was so not into the spiders, but then the author introduces Ralph,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden I want a pet spider, but it has to be Ralph. Cannot be
I
any other
was
spider.
I was ready to lead this episode off with an apology for picking a book with so many spiders in it until I read about Ralph. And
Uh
then I was like,
huh.
I'm not apologizing.
No,
I picked Ralph.
the star of the book.
So Ralph the spider is basically Sophie's pet spider that she sends home with Annie when she's feeling down or alone so that Ralph can keep her company and also helps Sophie control Annie's life. Because while their friendship is getting closer, Sophie is aggressively trying to get Annie to forget about Sam because she can see how much of a hold he still has, which we hinted at before. And she convinces Annie that she doesn't need a man to be happy. She can be independent and make herself happy, which is an important message
It
and my
is.
favorite message of this book. And Annie has never been without a boyfriend. So this concept is abnormal to her. And she starts reflecting about the fact that she's never been not in a relationship and how she
Mm-hmm.
has kind of, like you said, changed herself not just for Sam, but for past boyfriends also. So Ralph, when he's not wearing adorable clothes and pointy hats,
The bow
oh my God,
tie. I can't. A little
I can't.
tuxedo.
And he had a little winter hat to go
Uh huh.
outside because it's cold. He's knocking Annie's phone out of her hands when she
Mm-hmm.
goes to text Sam and crying loudly when she cries over Sam.
Uh huh.
It's all very intense.
It is.
But Ralph is also a very loyal companion. He helps her do things. She shares her food with him. They have a
He's an emotional
they
support
have a good
spider.
relation. Exactly. He is basically a little puppy,
Mm-hmm.
but not as he does have a little, some temper tantrums. So now we have an interactive pet slash friend spider. And
Who
let's
also
get back to
Annie does not question.
does not question it. Does not question it at all. She makes him a little bed.
Uh-huh.
She feeds him all the time. She talks to him all the time.
Yep.
She hides from him when she's going to text Sam
Yes.
or distracts him with a present of crickets so
Mm-hmm.
that she can go and hide from him. It's very intense. So let's get back to this haunted castle. Annie doesn't want to sleep over Sophie's because keeps seeing ghosts, but she's not sure if they're ghosts. And she's kind of questioning her own judgment and eyeballs and all of this. But on one occasion, when she's in the indoor pool that we discussed, one of the ghosts grabs her legs and tries to pull her underwater and drown her.
Mm-hmm.
So Sophie is like, girl, no problem. I'll take care of the ghosts. Nothing to worry about. I don't want you to stop coming to my house, so I'm going to take care of the ghosts for you. I got this. Meanwhile, all the townspeople are subtly warning Annie that Sophie is dangerous and bad news, which Annie doesn't really believe because Sophie has been so amazing
Mm-hmm.
and so kind, besides cursing the kid, of course, but it was a blip. And Oscar, the owner of the coffee shop, is not so subtle.
No.
He's like, people who go to Sophie's mansion castle don't leave. And Annie's like, okay. And she hears around the town that his wife had actually gotten really close to Sophie and she went missing. So Oscar blames Sophie and says that she killed her, which we never do find out what happened, do we?
No, we don't.
It's just a mystery to this day
She just
because
left town and just
Sophie
never
denies
returned.
it. I mean, I can see both sides because Sophie does have a little bit of a temper,
She
but
does.
also it kind of sounds like it could be Sophie convinced the wife that she should
That's
be an
the
independent
vibe.
woman.
That's the vibe I think that I got.
Yeah.
I don't think there was any ill will towards his wife. I just think the wife realized that she didn't want this life. I mean, it's a dick move to like abandon your son, but
Yeah. But I don't know. Oscar doesn't sound that great. Well, at first he did until he started getting like this. But
Mhm.
anyway, so now Annie's finding her independence. And even though she still misses Sam desperately and still texts him and calls him and whatever, she's like, I can have my own life. I can take care of myself. I can be happy like Sophie. So all of these townspeople meddling is starting to piss her off. And it's during one of these times of her being annoyed and being emotional with Oscar that she realizes that she has some witchy powers of her own. Annie is a witch, and she makes her cup levitate in front of Oscar. So once again, the spider is out of the bag. So basically, Annie has sacrificed fitting into this small town for her relationship with Sophie. And she made the conscious decision to choose Sophie over the other townspeople and being accepted and not having people look at her sideways and, etc. And so she's now feared by the townspeople as the rumor spreads about her witchiness because they're like, oh my gosh, another one of you. I was so stressed out by their friendship. Like at any time, Annie can say the wrong thing and Sophie could turn on her, but Annie is not concerned about that at all.
And it was so weird for me because I understand that Sophie's logic was that didn't she didn't see the point of like being in a relationship and that being alone is fine. But she had like this weird obsession with Sophie or with Annie that came off though as Sophie was trying to date her.
Oh, did you get that vibe?
I did. Like I got the vibe
Okay.
that like Sophie was kind of not like I don't even know if I want to say like in love with Annie, but it was just giving more trying to be in a relationship kind of vibe. But I understand that she knew what Annie was, and so she was trying to convince her. But she
Hmm.
was definitely very attached to her in a way that I saw it more in that light than trying to be friends. But then it's why, but it was hard for me to think that way because I know that the author makes it pretty clear that Sophie's not into that.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I felt it was more of I mean, I definitely felt the overbearing intensity,
Mm-hmm.
but to me it was more mother-daughter vibe
Okay.
because she was so intense about trying to convince Annie of what she needed and how she could be a better person and et
Mm-hmm.
cetera, et cetera. But I get what you're saying. It was definitely a weird dynamic.
It was like you said, just very intense. Like it was a very
Hmm.
overbearing relationship, and I think the way that how like lackadaisical Annie was about everything, it was just kind of like okay.
Yeah, I agree. So this whole time she's not concerned until she overhears a conversation between Oscar and some of the other townspeople. And she starts to get nervous because they're talking about how Sophie threatened to make a tonic from their bones. And I'm like, it kind of feels like she probably had a reason to say that, but I'm I'm just giving her the benefit of the doubt here. And then Annie's like, "Oh, I didn't think of that. I didn't think that perhaps she could turn on anyone at any moment."
Mm-hmm.
And also, they say there's only room for one in this town. And she's like, "Uh-oh, one what?" Is Sophie's plan all along to befriend me, then bamboozle me and take me out so she could be the only sheriff or witch in town? Maybe. So Annie starts spiraling pretty hard
Mm-hmm.
after hearing this conversation. And Sophie knows everything, obviously. So when Annie sees her and tries to play it cool, she's like, okay, I just got to play it cool for right now. I got to brush her off so that I can process all of this doubt I'm having all of a sudden. Sophie is like, no, girl, tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Forces it out of her. They have a big confrontation. Annie is torn between shitting herself and thinking that Sophie wouldn't harm her. It
Exactly.
goes back and
It
forth.
does.
And Ralph, sweet
Oh my
baby
God.
Ralph,
I know.
grows into this huge spider the size of a couch, and he starts to get real mean looking. And then Sophie turns into a cartoon witch, complete with a horrible looking face and a broomstick that she rides through the air. It's very theatrical. And
Yeah.
she's like, is this what you want me to look like? Is this what you think a witch is? And I was having fun with this scene. I was kind of picturing Hocus Pocus, where they're like flying through the air
Yeah. I was
and
thinking of
taunting
I
them.
was thinking of like the Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz.
Okay, yes. Yes, definitely. That's
Yeah.
the face
Face. Yeah.
I was getting
Uh-huh.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So Annie also finds out that the ghosts that Sophie got rid of were actually people that she had killed. And that's why they're tethered to the house. So Sophie is turning into a scary witch real quickly. And she tells Annie that if she leaves, to never, ever come back. And Annie leaves. What the fuck?
I know.
Because, of course, ex-boyfriend Sam is coming to see her to work things out. Everything is going to be perfect. Sam is
Mm-hmm.
coming. And even though Annie has come so far in her independence and found out she's a literal witch, for fuck's sake, she still wants boring old Sam.
I know.
In this situation, who are you choosing? Your ex-boyfriend who broke up with you and said some kind of mean things, or your new friend who spoils you but is also sometimes a violent witch?
I mean, the latter sounds ideal.
1,000%. I'm hanging out in that castle. I'm getting
Same.
baked goods.
I don't love
I'm
the
getting free
ghosts. The
pancakes.
ghosts aren't my favorite, but
Well, she put them in the basement,
if they're
so just don't
trapped,
go in the basement.
it's fine. I get to hang out with Ralph. Everything's good.
And obviously, you'd rather be on her good side. And if someone
Mm-hmm.
else pisses you off, she'll
You
just curse
got
them
you
real
got
quick. They'll
some
be coughing up
you
spiders,
got a witch in your arsenal.
Exactly. So it's really a win-win-win-win-win situation with Sophie and a big loser with Sam. So I liked this, that it takes about 10 minutes of being with Sam
Mm-hmm.
before Annie realizes she is a different person now. She made a horrible mistake having him come there. He also thinks he's completely irresistible and tries to have sex with her immediately. And she's like,
Yeah. No, thank you.
stop. And
Mm-hmm.
he is flabbergasted. He's
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? So you get more insight into how their relationship was. He ran the whole thing. He took what he wanted when he
Mm-hmm.
wanted it. And she was just
Along for the ride.
going with whatever he wanted all the time in order to be in love.
Mm-hmm.
Then obviously the real kicker is when she leaves the room, she hears him on the phone with his new girlfriend lying about where he is and saying he loves her, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Oh, so you kept your backup plan in case this didn't work?" And he's like, what? Huh?" Annie confronts Sam, does some light torture on him, which I think was deserved, in my
I agree.
opinion.
Mm-hmm.
She went a little easy on him. But she's a new witch. She doesn't know exactly how to control her emotions, obviously. She's like, I could kill him right now, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to. It's fine. And he goes on his way. And of course, we need a happy ending. Annie apologizes to Sophie, and Sophie makes her work for it because Sophie said never come back here.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, she forgives her.
It's her witchy. It's her fellow witch.
All is well in
Gotta
the
stick
witchy
together.
world. So then we get our epilogue, which is around 25 years later. It's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Annie and Sophie are both queens of the town now. Everyone fears them, does whatever they ask for fear of being cursed at any moment. I can only imagine that Annie is getting free pancakes every day. And it ends with Annie recruiting Madison, who was one of her old students. But I was confused. Is this a recruitment thing, or do you have to be a witch? It's very unclear.
I don't know.
Because Annie was a witch. Like Sophie said, as soon as I met you, I knew. And that's why she befriended
Well,
her and
maybe, but
took
maybe
her under
like,
her wing.
and I kind of got the vibe though that maybe Madison could be a witch too. So maybe it's kind of like a dormant thing that needs to be ignited by another witch.
Oh, also because when she was talking to Madison, and Madison was basically saying how her life was at rock bottom and she had to move back with her parents and lost her job or whatever, lost her partner, all this stuff. So maybe it's like
Mm-hmm.
activated when you're really having a hard time, like it was for Annie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Okay. All right. Cleared that one up. But anyway, that's the end of the story. Happily ever after. Kind of. Kind of, because there's still a lot of unknowns
There's
going on in
so
this town.
many unanswered questions that I have.
Yes.
A lot of loose ends.
So, okay, before we get into the questions, what questions did you want answered that were not answered?
I think I just want to know why Annie was so quick to not judge the situation and just immediately went along with it, because she seems like such a, I feel like she's a level-headed person that's kind of run by her emotions. And so this is like a
Mm-hmm.
lot that's happening and she's just not phased by it at all, and that just doesn't really make any sense to me.
I agree. I think that she is super level-headed, and that's why I got the same vibe. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, how's she just believing this? But the more I think about it, the way that she said she was so accepting of all these shitty guys in her life because they gave her love, it's like Sophie gave her that immediate attention and showered all this affection on her. It was basically like her past relationships. So she just kind of believed whatever Sophie told
Mm-hmm.
her. I mean, to an extreme point. She could have asked a couple follow-up questions. There were no follow-up questions.
No,
I
and
would have
it's
had a
also,
list.
and why wouldn't she question that every time she's with Sophie, she's like getting rip roaring drunk for like no reason? There's a lot of alcohol
Yeah.
use in this book, which again, you know how I feel about when the protagonist of the book constantly needs to be drinking. Woe is me, I need to wallow. And I didn't like that this was, because from the beginning of the story, I didn't get that vibe from Annie. So the fact that she was just drinking all the time
Hmm.
didn't really line up with who I thought she was as a character. So that was kind of like weird for me.
I agree because it gave so there was two separate sides of it. There was her admitting that she was drinking every night to numb herself because she was so sad. So she would go to the
Mm-hmm.
liquor store every day, and the person who worked there was like judging her, and she's like, I don't care. But then when she was with Sophie and Sophie would pour wine and didn't seem to be drinking any,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, is this just because Sophie can't get drunk because she's a witch and she's how
I
high would your
think
tolerance be after hundreds of years? It kind of gave like a sinister vibe.
it did, and I was kind of wondering if the drinks were like laced, and if it was, because then there was also the kind of when she's in the drunken haze of Sophie like taking care of her and like
Oh, with the
putting her to
mushrooms?
bed and everything. It was, so it's just kind of, I don't know, like it was a lot. I feel like there was a lot of drinking with really no true reasoning for it.
I think it was for Annie to be dependent on Sophie
Mm.
because then Sophie would take care of her and
But
she
like,
would sleep
which
there
is
and
ironic because that's kind of like a double standard, because Sophie tries to tell Annie she doesn't need to be dependent on anybody, but yet she like wants Sophie to depend.
Mhm. I agree. I total double standard. And she does kind of address it and say, well, this is what friends do. This is what friends do. Like saying this is because this is a friendship, it's okay, but it shouldn't be like that in a romantic relationship,
Mm-hmm.
which I agree with. But
I
We
just
already
think that
said Sophie was very a lot.
it was, and I feel obviously she references that she lost her coven like along the way, so she's truly by herself in this town. She doesn't really have any relationships with anyone. It's all business transactional relationships. So when she meets Annie and she gets the witchy vibe and just wants to bring her into her circle, I could understand her being a lot because she just
Hmm.
wants to latch on and she wants Annie to like her and like
Yeah,
want
because
to be
she
around
was so
her.
lonely. And can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine that?
And like,
Like,
well, they both were in like their own
mhm.
ways too, so I can understand, what Annie didn't question at all the quickness of their friendship either.
Yeah.
you
Which I
know
was like, I mean, she kept just saying, wow, people in this town are really nice. And I'm like, they're not that nice.
mm-hmm.
That's, you're sleeping over her house after the first time hanging out with her. It's kind of weird. But then they also say how Sophie just has an effect on people. Like she's intoxicating and mesmerizing.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Annie's going to want to, do anything to get her approval and be her friend and all that stuff. So I get it, but I don't get it. You know what I mean?
No, I agree.
So, what did you think about specifically Sophie's very aggressive approach toward Annie forgetting about Sam? Is this too much friend intervention?
I think that this is also what it felt a lot like jealousy at some points, which is I think what gave me the vibe as well that she was, I don't want to say coming on to Annie because it's not what she was doing, but it just the vibes of the situation, and she was very much, it was a lot. Like
Hmm.
it was a lot. I understand wanting your friend to stop toxic behavior, but she was, taking her phone away, and then I felt like there was a situation where she kind of, there was a situation with the phone that made me feel as if Sophie did some witchy business.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like she was definitely spying,
Mm-hmm.
or was Ralph reporting back? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure. It felt like she was looking through Ralph's eyes at some
I know.
points.
I wondered that too, actually. If like Ralph was her familiar.
Yeah,
Mm.
because they hint at it, but they never explicitly say it. And then there's that whole thing in the bathroom where the writing on the wall, that was actually a really funny scene. The whole dinner
Mm-hmm.
with that guy. Anyway, the writing on the bathroom wall, and she's like, it was Sophie talking to me. And Sophie's like, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, did Sophie do it or not? Like I was confused. I definitely think it was too much intervention because I got that same vibe, the jealousy. I feel like it was coming from a good place
Mm-hmm.
because Sophie was right that Annie should give up on Sam. But I mean, we know well enough. You can't convince someone of something.
No.
They have to come to that
Learn on their
realization
own
on their
terms.
own.
Yeah.
But my favorite element of this was Annie finding her independence. And even though she did it at the very pushy hands of Sophie and Ralph, she needed that push because
Mm-hmm.
she never would have given up on Sam.
Mm-mm.
And she still didn't give up on Sam, even when she was focusing on herself, but she was realizing the importance and saying, oh, if I got back with Sam, it wouldn't be the same
Mm-hmm.
because I'm my own person. So
Mm-hmm.
she was still growing, even though she was pining over Sam. What do you think of Annie's circumstance by the end of the novel? She's powerful and independent, but also doesn't have any real friends except Sophie because everyone else is terrified of her.
But I don't think that that matters because she didn't really have any friends to begin with.
Yeah,
So now instead of her having no friends and depending on a man, she now has a relationship on equal ground that she
that's true.
knows it's not, she doesn't have to worry that like Sophie's ever gonna like leave her, or that
Hmm.
Annie has to be someone else around her. Annie can actually be like her true self.
And even in her New York City life, she didn't have any close
No,
friends.
she like finally hung out with a coworker, and then she keeps
Hmm.
glancing back on that time and wondering, oh, should I have been nicer to her? Like, should I have tried to create a friendship? But it doesn't seem like she really had friends. It was just She was just
And
continuously
it
in
didn't seem like
romantic
she wanted
relationships.
them.
No,
Or,
because then when she's with Sam, there's the conversation of that she just would always be in her pajamas and she didn't want to go out. She always wanted to stay in. So she was very much a homebody and was happy
mhm.
to not do anything.
And even when she was meeting the people in this new town,
Mm-hmm.
like that, the guidance counselor from work, she was like, this person is so annoying. I would never want to be friends with them. I'd never want to be around
Mm-hmm.
them. And half of that was because, oh, this person is nothing compared to Sophie. But I feel like the other half was she didn't want to make friends. So it's
Mm-mm.
like if she didn't have Sophie, I don't think she would have made friends in the town anyway.
No.
There's a quote that I love that when you think about it being from this badass independent witch Sophie, it makes it even better.
Mm-hmm.
But this is when Sophie's kind of trying to convince Annie about taking control of your own destiny and not putting your future in the hands of
Mm-hmm.
a man, which God forbid. So here's the quote. Fate is just another invention to trick us into complacency, inaction. If one assumes that they cannot change their circumstances, they won't try. When you think about it, there's a myriad of ways we're conditioned to passivity, women especially. I feel like it fits in such this broad sense.
Mm-hmm.
And even though this is this kind of lighthearted, witchy, cozy, horror light story, there is this much deeper message of women taking their own independence.
Yeah.
And even though it's not done in the best way because Sophie has cursed people and hurt people, et cetera, and everyone in town is afraid of her, and that's the only reason they respect her, the point is that she knows the importance of not relying on other people to make you happy.
Yeah.
Or relying on fate to make sure that you have a fulfilled life, which is very important. So, last question I have, let's flash back to the psychic
Mm-hmm.
and the dark energy interpretation. What do you make of this now that you've read the story?
One of the things that I thought about while reading this book is that whole scene with the psychic really didn't play itself out. It just kind of seemed like pointless almost. Like I feel as if there could have been more done with that because I don't get the dark energy vibes that the
Mm-hmm.
psychic was portraying. I can understand that maybe she's seeing kind of a darkness or like a blackness because Annie's a witch, so I don't really know what her
Mm-hmm.
soul looks like from that perspective. But there was really no fruition of the psychic's telling.
Yeah.
There really just wasn't.
It was a missed opportunity.
It was.
For
And
sure.
she brings it up like once or twice towards the end of the book, but I'm just not getting the dark energy vibe.
And she brings it up when she catches up with her old coworker and everything the psychic told the old
Yeah.
coworker came true. But I just feel like it was such a missed opportunity because it could have really tied in throughout the
Yeah.
entire book. I mean, she
Mhm.
could have had
That was what I was waiting
so
for.
much more because it was set up like that in the beginning.
Mhm.
Like you thought, okay, this is like the catalyst for our whole story.
Yeah.
And then it just wasn't.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I interpreted the dark energy as definitely Annie, not
Yes.
Sophie. And I feel like at first they were trying to make it seem like it was Sophie, but Annie finds out about her power because she can't control her anger and her emotions. And it just seems like she loves that power of being feared
Mhm.
because she didn't have to choose it, but she did make that choice.
No, and obviously there's that whole scenario in the restaurant where she makes the coworker's husband choke on bones, and then her reaction was just to fucking laugh. Like, okay, yes, that's a little sinister. You know, that she just couldn't
He
have
deserved
a
it.
oh no, he did 100%.
He was
But it
horrible.
was then like when she tortures Sam and that those are really the only two things that I would equate to like dark energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it didn't seem like obviously Sophie wasn't doing that. She did it during their confrontation, but it was kind of feeding off of what Annie thought about her.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Sophie could have been like that when she first found out she was a witch.
Mm-hmm.
I would be acting a fool
I
if
know.
I had powers.
Same.
Don't cross me. Poor Eric. He'd never survive.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, anything else you want to discuss before we get to our ratings?
No. I believe I hit the points that stuck out to me the most.
So our rating scale this week is tiny knit hats for Ralph.
Oh, I want to give Ralph an infinity of tiny knit hats.
Well, he has other non-knit hats, so it's okay. You can
Okay.
limit the number of knit hats that he gets. He has a little pointy hat, like you said, he has a
He
tuxedo.
does a little
He probably has
tuxedo.
cute little socks for all
And
his
like, wait,
legs.
can we talk about when he like got drunk on like New Year's Eve? I can't.
I had the best just visions of Ralph. And I was
Honestly,
like, I want
it
this
made
to
me
be a
so
movie so I could see Ralph, but I
every
would be
time that Ralph
scared.
was front and center, I was so happy about it. Like I literally closed the book and I think my Goodreads review was I love Ralph so much.
I love Ralph.
That
I
was all I
hate
said.
spiders in real life, but I love Ralph.
Uh-huh.
And I pictured, in Harry Potter where Ron is up against the huge spider and then it has roller
Yeah.
skates on and it's like
Oh
bumbling around.
yeah.
I pictured Ralph drunk, like just in roller skates.
That's good. I like that.
All right, so how many tiny knit hats are you giving to Ralph?
I'm giving Ralph 3.5 knit hats. I left this book feeling a little underwhelmed. The writing was fun. I liked the way the author wrote. I loved Ralph. I just feel like there were a lot of missed opportunities and a lot of loose ends that really weren't resolved or talked about again.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't find it believable. Like I understand it's like a supernatural.
You didn't find Ralph believable?
Oh no, I love Ralph.
Okay.
Ralph was believable. I think I didn't find Annie's perception believable. There was just too
Mm-hmm.
much going along with it without questioning anything. So I don't know. I really felt underwhelmed with it, but I love the witchy vibes. I love the town. The author can paint a picture, so I can't fault her for that. But the story itself was just not my favorite.
I agree. I had much higher hopes for it.
Mm-hmm.
I gave this 4 tiny knit hats for Ralph because I did think it was very fun and unexpected. I was expecting something much more sinister and scary from the book summary, and
I
that this is a
agree.
horror book and that she's a horror writer.
Did you ever read Black Sheep?
Yes, I was going to bring that up. I love Black Sheep. That one is much better than this one, but the writing, like the fun parts of this writing are even more magnified. The main character is sarcastic and self-deprecating, but she also kind of comes into her own, and it was scarier. That book was actually a little scary.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I highly recommend Black Sheep, especially if you like the writing of this book.
I do. I think that the writing was good because it kept me engaged. You know, I might not have loved the trajectory of the story, but the way that she wrote, I really appreciated the lightness, like the humor that she interlaced throughout it was liked that. Yeah. I just think the story itself was a little weak.
I was just expecting something different. I was expecting something a little scary, maybe a little mystery, but this mostly just felt kind of wholesome.
It did. And which is intriguing to me that they would categorize this book as horror.
Yeah. Just because she's a horror writer, I guess.
I know, but we've talked about this before, because wasn't there another book we did that was categorized as horror that was not horror, whatsoever?
Mm-hmm. So well, even Shirley Jackson, it's
maybe that's
those
what
aren't
I'm thinking
scary.
About. Yeah, I guess that there's different, obviously, subgenres to horror, and maybe because this one had a supernatural element.
It had the paranormal, and it had witches.
Yeah, I will admit, the ghost part was creepy to me. I didn't that got me, but the rest of it was just.
Yeah, I was gonna say there were a few scary elements. Like you said, the ghosts, the part where Sophie turns into a scary witch and Ralph turns into a couch-sized spider. That was scary. But what stood out to me was the friendship and a woman finding her independence. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is a wholesome story, and
Mm-hmm.
Ralph is here, and I love him. I I just enjoy the way Rachel Harrison writes female characters
Mm-hmm.
because they're witty and
Yeah.
they have that dry humor, but they're also powerful and also a little bit dark.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that I am that way.
I agree with that.
So I definitely recommend Black Sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
I
do
do
want to
want to
read
read
that.
The Return because The Return is her most popular one and
Okay.
it's won a bunch of awards. So I definitely want to read that one soon because oh, and she has another book coming out next month,
Oh,
actually.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I think it was just that this wasn't what I was expecting, but
Mm-hmm.
I really do love her writing style.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
would
like,
definitely read again. I would. She's not someone that
mhm,
I'm like writing off like Stephen Graham Jones,
yeah,
Grady Hendrix.
Grady Hendrix. Well, they're also men.
I know. We only
We
love
give
Riley
women the benefit
Sager
of,
on this podcast. Although I am doing a male author next month, so we'll see how that one turns out.
oh, yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
are. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We give women the benefit of the doubt around here.
I know, because one of my
Anyway,
books that I talked about, which I'll talk about in Bookish Banter, I read a male thriller this month, and I was so fucking disappointed in it. So I can't.
I read a thriller by the same author
I saw that.
this month.
I was like, oh, we're reading the same author right now, different books.
Uh-huh. So we'll chat about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, let me just say I am constantly, okay, not constantly because I don't try that hard. I am sometimes searching for a man to prove me wrong.
I agree.
And so far only Riley Sager has done so. I feel like I'm holding him to too high of a
I
standard, but the
did
bar is in hell,
I
people.
did
The
like
bar's in
S.A.
hell.
Cos.
Okay, I liked S.A. Cosby too.
Yeah, but he's not really the thriller kind of genre, so I feel like his is more kind of like
Yeah, and he
lit,
also wasn't trying to like write
No,
women,
no,
you
exactly.
know?
These men that try to write women and just don't do
Yeah.
good jobs.
So if people don't like Riley Sager and they don't understand why we're fangirling so hard, the bar is so low that any good book is above it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
All right. So the moral of this story slash review is Ralph is one of my favorite characters
Of
ever.
all time.
Love him so much. I would actually like to see some fan art of Ralph with
Oh my
his
god, that'd be so
little
cool.
hats.
Uh-huh.
That'd be very cute. Or him like just next to an apple pie that's Sophie's
I
bacon.
know.
Anyway, all right. Anything else you want to add?
No.
I think we got it all. That's all we have for you today. If you like what you heard, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you are using. If you have any book recommendations or questions for us, you can email us at fullybookedcalfpod@gmail.com. Also, be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at fullybookedcalfpod to see our upcoming reads, other book recommendations, all types of fun stuff. Thanks for checking us out, and remember,
If you need us, we're fully booked.
bye!
Bye.